This is the first virtual version of the Friends of Lambourn Library talks, and it's lovely to see so many familiar faces and also new ones. So I hope old friends and new are going to have a good evening. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Friends of Lambourn Library, we basically were set up, I can't remember how many years ago it is, everything's blurring, 3-4 years ago, when West Berkshire had the brilliant idea of closing all the branch libraries and just keeping Newbury open. This was obviously a bad idea, and those of you in Hungerford will also have recognised the same pattern of behaviour. The Friends of Lambourn Library was the group which basically made a huge fuss about the closure of Lambourn Library, helped to convince West Berkshire, along with other groups, that it was a bad idea and that the library should stay open. And then since then, we have supported the library, we fundraise, we guide West Berkshire in what their policy should be towards libraries and in general, and Lambourn in particular. We also started running these series of essentially winter or off-season talks, where people come along to the library, which is another point. A good many people who perhaps wouldn't visit the library in Lambourn actually discovered where it was and come regularly to talks and have appreciated the variety of talks that we have put on. We also, and I should do a quick plug for this, we also, if you would like to participate in the West Berkshire Lottery, we are registered with them, so you can actually support us through buying lottery tickets. Right, to get on with some housekeeping. I suppose I ought to introduce myself. You can see that I'm Susan Cocker. I'm chairman of the Friends of Lambourn Library committee. Well, it always seems to me that it's a very brave thing to publish a book. Not the writing of it, although that takes courage as well, but the publishing, the laying out of one's inner thoughts in front of an unpredictable public. The reaction is beyond the author's control, yet he or she allows people a glimpse inside. Brian has not only written a book, but Penny Post has published it, a venture he will be talking about this evening. Brian is well known to, I think, most of us. Originally a Londoner, he came to live in East Garston 22 years ago. He works with Penny on Penny Post, writing the weekly local news column, and he also contributes to Four Legs Radio. Tonight, he is in conversation with Emma Milne-White, co-owner of the wonderful Hungerford Bookshop, through which one can buy copies of Brian's book, Unaccustomed As I Am. It's my very great pleasure to hand you over to Brian and Emma.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Brian. It's with great pleasure that I get to chat with you about your book, Unaccustomed As I Am. So I've often read Brian's stories in Penny Post, and for years, whenever Brian's popped into the shop, I've said, come on, you ought to publish these in a book, gather them up together. People would love to read them. And lo, here it is. The subtitle of the book is 26 Tales of Fiction, Parody and Personal Mishap. And now in one of the tales involving personal mishap, you do say that you've resolved to avoid public speaking ever since. So we are particularly grateful that you are talking about your book on behalf for Friends of Lambourn Library. And how does it feel to see all your pieces gathered up into a book form?
Well, sort of, as Sue said, it is quite scary in a way, but a lot of the stories, as you said, have been published in Penny Post before. So I I'm not, I'm used to seeing the stuff that I write being not in print, but online and available for people to read. So yeah, it was the logical next step. And there's a lot more, in fact, than are in that book. I could probably have done 2 more. We could probably do 2 more just with the stuff that exists already, without, even if I didn't write any more, which I probably will. So yeah, but it was a good thing to have done. I'm glad I did it. Definitely, we did it.
Thinking, shall we start with the first story, which is the title of the book, Unaccustomed As I Am? And when I was rereading it in the book, I just kept roaring with laughter. I just think it's so funny. And it's one of your real life stories based on something that happened to you when you were young, and you suddenly found yourself having to compare a cabaret evening when you were at university in Cambridge. Do you want to speak a bit about it, or do you want to read a little bit about it?
Well, I'll speak a bit about it, I think, briefly. I mean, there are several stories that I wrote which involve mining my own past, and for reasons that maybe we can discuss a bit later on, is that the idea of mining your own past is quite a very good way actually, of starting writing, because you've got a number of the problems that one normally has to contend with, like what is the plot, what are the characters, what is the ending, sorted out already. You know this because you lived through the event, often replaying it in your mind in slow motion for many years afterwards, if it's particularly grim. And I decided that the best thing to do was not to start with any stories that showed me up in a particularly good light, not that I can offhand think of any, but ones that did the opposite, because there's much more humorous potential in those. And actually all of us, I'm looking at all of you now, every single one of us has got incident or incidents in our past which could maybe be taken out and dusted and re-examined and actually found to have humorous aspects to them. And of course, the other point is that you can be as rude as you like about yourself. If I were to tell a story about you or about Penny or anybody, I'd have to be a bit careful about how much I portrayed you as being the idiot or the fool or the unaware person. I can do it as much as I like to myself. And so yeah, there was quite a few like that, and I found it half a dozen, probably a dozen altogether I've got, which were days that I would probably in retrospect have handled a bit differently. And that was definitely one of them. I was invited, or somehow was wangled my way into comparing an event at a May ball in Cambridge, and it's impossible to describe just how far short of the expectations that a reasonable person would have had of such a seemingly undemanding job I fell. But anyway, the story reveals that. And it was actually exactly as I said at the beginning, the whole thing. In fact, I think this is one of the first ones I wrote in this vein, came back to me when I saw an article about Kit and McConnell in the Newbury Weekly News. And I thought, oh, is that the same Kit who was in Kit and the Widow, who once locked me in a toilet while I was trying to compare an event? And it was. So I thought, right, it's about time the story was told. So there's several more like that, but hopefully amusing ones, hopefully put a sort of twist on it, which make stupidity into something slightly more engaging than it seemed at the time.
Actually, there's a line in there. It said the atmosphere was of light-hearted and intoxicated amateurism, which really tickled me, and I can't think why. Perhaps because it resonates with myself also. But I was wondering, you say it's easy to make to talk about yourself. Because you can take the mickey out of yourself, be self-deprecating. So are you ever tempted to send your book to the people that you've met? Would you do it if you could?
Well, I did. I sent it to Kit.
Did you?
Yeah, without so far having had a response. He'd read the story. I sent him a link to the story. I was able to track him down through a few sort of mutual, somebody I knew who knew him, as it turned out. And he said, oh yes, I remember the evening. That was the launch of his career. He said that was one of the first gigs I ever did. I said it was one of the last ones I ever did. Yeah, I have. I've several of the people. I mean, a few of them are here. Have been participants in these stories. And yes, of course, one looks for readers wherever one can. The great thing is to write about a large number of people you know, and it kind of increases the number of people who are likely to read the story, I suppose.
Well, because people are intrigued to see themselves in a story, do you think?
Oh yeah, but I don't really like, you know, this awful sort of joke you get about writers. Oh, we have to be careful what we say. We're going to end up in one of your novels. I mean, actually, most of the time you write. If I named somebody and I said it was Becca who said this, or it was Madeline who said that, or whatever, then that is true. But it's often things that happen too recently and involve people I know. I don't tend to crop up so much. It's more stories that happened some time ago. There's a bit of distance, a bit of time for gestation. But yeah, you sometimes disguise people or conflate them if they're actually real life people. I suppose that around now, but it depends on the tale, really.
Yeah. Well, as we've spoken a little bit about that story, and I find it incredibly funny, do you want to just read out a little bit of it to give us a flavour of how you write?
I'll just read the first paragraph, which I've sort of summarised. It says, "Unaccustomed as I am. Leafing through the newspaper the other day, my eye was caught by an article about Kit and McConnell's Cabaret Act. The name Kit and the mention of cabaret stirred a memory. Could this be the same Kit who then, in a partnership called Kit and the Widow, locked me out of the dining hall at Queen's College, Cambridge, where I was attempting to compare an event at a May ball all those years ago, forcing me to climb through a lavatory window and leading to a state of confusion that made me insult Noel Coward's pianist? A few minutes' research on the web showed that it was. This event happened in June 1980 at the end of my last term at Queen's during May week, in fact 10 days or so in June, at which time May balls were and probably still are held by most of the colleges. The organising committees were composed of students, smart cookies when dealing with the works of Plato or the melting point of potassium, but ill-prepared when it came to the rapacious demands of marquee hire firms, champagne merchants and musical agents. The result was that ticket prices increased to stratospheric levels. No one seemed to mind. There were enough people who were prepared to pay and plenty of others for whom the high prices gave an additional incentive to break into the events, which was quite easy. Any shortfall was deftly apportioned elsewhere by the college bursar. This combination of improvidence and financial chicanery was in some ways a foretaste of the banking crisis of 2008. Indeed, this catastrophe was probably caused by exactly the same people, no longer ratty students, but sleek plutocrats, more at ease with handling vast sums of money, but no less careless about the consequences of their profligacy. If you worked at a May ball, you obviously didn't have to pay to get in. Somehow I wangled, or was persuaded to take, I forget which now, the position of compere at the cabaret, which took place in the medieval dining hall, a place of elaborate cornices, minstrel galleries, and eternal draughts. All I had to do was to ensure that the stage was set for each act, and then introduce them. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah. Well, what follows?
What follows? Very, very funny. I particularly liked you describing having to climb out of a very small window, and then your foot slipped, so you fell down the loo.
Yes.
And then it says, thus chastened, I returned backstage where Kit and the Widow were lurking. If they noticed my torn shirt, muddy shoes, a loosened tie, and the odour of urine and sweat, they gave no sign of it. I said nothing to them. There seemed nothing to say.
No, it wasn't. No, it was a truly awful event. I mean, I've had worse nights, but that was certainly one of the ones that had a number of ingredients that really, I think, is a cautionary tale for anyone wanting to embark on any activity which involves public speaking. I think, you know, the one word I'd use is prepare beforehand.
Yes.
I didn't. And
would you say it's fair that sort of the themes of intoxication and being sort of ill prepared is a theme that runs throughout the book?
I think it's an awfully interesting choice of words. I think it's a theme that runs throughout my life, actually. I think you've put your finger on it. A combination of intoxication and lack of preparation, I think really is yeah, I think that's, if we translate that in Latin, and I'll have that on my tombstone, I think.
Because it crops up in other, like...
it does, yes.
Telephone, which is about when you were quite small, your family having a party and it all going wrong. Oh, and even fictional...
I wasn't drunk at that. I was 8.
No, that's very true. That's so you can blame your parents.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it all started, yeah.
And even fictional stories, like The Last Turkey in the Shop, where a man comes home with a turkey stuck on his arm.
Well, that was a result. That was written as inspired by a publishing company I used to work for called Columbus. Wonderful place in its own way, but there was a lot of drinking that went on there, mainly by the sales team, which is I wasn't part of. So that's just an observation, I think, rather than a personal reaction. Of course, you make, as I was saying, often the narrator, even if the narrator wasn't me, then that story, I imagined what the character would have been through, and so that was a sort of more fictional. And part of the act of making yourself seem less well behaved in the story, or coming out of it less well, is of course to make yourself a little bit drunk. Although I'm not suggesting that was never absent from the reality.
One of the other stories I found really funny was it was called Stiff Upper Lip.
Ah, yes.
Which is it's a true life story as well, where you're going to an interview at Debrets, the people that write books on etiquette. Yeah. I mean, that was a brilliant story about not being at all prepared. It wasn't so much that you were slightly inebriated, it was just that you'd done no preparation whatsoever for it.
No, I wasn't inebriated. I mean, in fairness to me, I think we should claim I was hungover, because I was 24 and it was a Saturday morning. The main problem, as the story reveals, is that not only did I slice my top lip open while shaving, causing a wound that I'd never had on my face, apart from once when I had a car accident. I mean, it was appalling. But also, the person interviewing me had a problem of his own, which I won't reveal in case anyone feels moved on the strength of this remark to buy the book who hasn't done so, which made the two of us acting in concert in that way an absolutely gruesome event, completely awful. And I didn't get the job. But in fact, it's the only job interview I've ever been to. And most of the jobs I've got, I've just sort of got in the way that you've got to get a cold or something, or win a £25 premium bond. But this was the one attempt I made to do it properly, like grown-ups do. And it was just like the public speaking, it completely backfired. And I thought, right, I won't do that again.
Why did you want to work for them? Because you wrote to them, didn't you?
I must have been completely deranged. I don't know what prompted me to think I would want to have a job at the Bretts. I was living, as a story says, a really kind of bohemian life, sort of playing guitar and drinking beer in pubs and sort of having relationships with people, and it's just completely ill-fitting. But it happened, and it was an event that was just a day that just didn't fit with the rest of my life, that before or afterwards, and it just happened. And I thought it was, worth recording. It certainly had some singular moments in it, but that's all true. I mean, all the things are true. One conflates things sometimes. You edit, you allied things together, and maybe, for the sake of dramatic interest, combine two characters into one. But that was all pretty much straight, no spin on that one. That was pretty much straight reportage.
And so you have 3 sons, Brian, and do they take 4? Oh my goodness! And do they inherit your traits of being slightly ill-prepared for things?
Oh goodness me! Yes, yeah. With probably Toby less so, our youngest, but the other 3, I think, definitely. I think it's. I wouldn't like to make too much of being ill-prepared. I think that I probably never put myself in a situation where I've needed to do a job where an awful lot of preparation is needed. I may be better. I prefer kind of tend to wing things, and it sometimes works okay, and sometimes it's a disaster. And the disasters, as I've said, are sometimes worth remembering, if not fondly, then at least with a kind of humorous, wry smile about them, because they were funny. I mean, I hope I've made them so. But
I mean, it must be very nice actually you can be in a dire situation, like getting punched repeatedly by a greengrocer just because you pointed out about a misleading sign. I mean, obviously you weren't when you were being, physically assaulted.
Here comes a story.
Bother for a story, but
exactly. No, it took years. It took years afterwards. That was another day when it's strange. You get things that happen, like with the Kit and the Widow fiasco, or the interview fiasco, and it seems that one disaster often tends to trigger another one. Or it's possible that you just, as that day goes on, you tend to kind of you know, the situation you're in just puts you in a false situation with regard to life, and then you constantly find that you're kind of at odds with everything else. But it's quite satisfying looking back when you have something that where not one thing but 3 or 4 go wrong. I think it makes a better story, definitely. But,
a lot of stories, the real life stories involving mishap, are when you are younger, and they're not all like that, because there's some lovely ones. Penny suggests making a mandala. Is it a mandala?
oh, mandala, yes.
Which is quite reflective, called what's it, bringing out my inner yak,
Releasing my inner yak.
that's it.
Yeah.
And also one about what you think about when you're swimming up and down in the pool.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. No, those 2 I put in because, yes, exactly that, they were more reflective, and I thought they would be just a bit of, you know, a bit of balance and a bit of a change of mood, a change of tempo, something sort of slightly with the fuzz pedal on the guitar turned down a bit less, if you see what I mean. And yeah, they were more reflective.
It's not just because you're older, you live a more calmer and sensible life now.
Well, who knows? Yeah, time will tell, I guess.
So we've talked a lot about sort of the real life incidents, but as we've said, there's short stories in there as well, and also parodies, but we'll talk about the parodies a bit later. As I was reading some of the short stories, I noticed a theme of truth and points of view, and so there's one about the screenwriter who recounts a tale about the aftermath of a party that's held in quite a small, closely knit village
in Suffolk.
Suffolk. And he says, I've told this story often with a screenwriter's eye, carefully edited each time. And then sort of said, yes, this may or may not be the truth. It's just a version of the truth. And then we have a rather eerie story that I really need to read again, because I don't feel like there's hidden meanings in there that I didn't get first time round. And it's brilliant, though. It's very Dorian Gray-esque, called The Reflective Instruments Inspector, which is all about, so a man comes around to check these ladies' mirrors are in line with the law
requirements.
I mean, I'd love to know where you got the inspiration for that one.
Well, actually, that came years ago from one of my sons staring at a reflection of himself in a mirror, and I was just wondering what he thought he was looking at, because, you know, he was only about 4 at the time. It's a long time ago, and the story sort of came, and then I rewrote it substantially quite recently. But the idea was, the sort of slightly Orwellian idea, is that the council, in order to, no council is named, but you can slide your own one in there wherever you happen to live, has resorted to licensing mirrors or reflective instruments in order to raise money. Something that Sue with the library would recognise. You know, councils will resort to almost anything, or will try to. And therefore they need inspectors, and of course all the money therefore doesn't go to the libraries or the playgroups. It has to go on the inspectors, who are used to enforce the regulations, which is, you know, a point that may or may not be politically valid, but the idea of somebody coming around to inspect your mirrors and check that they work properly seems to me rather creepy. So
it was creepy, but
good,
I loved
good.
it.
It's meant to be. Good.
And another creepy one I think fits into that theme is called The Collector. I was going to read a line from it. So it's about this collector who's curating his pieces. You have to read the book if you want any more insight into it. And he says, depending where I stand, I get a different view. I move 3 feet back and there's a whole different collection there. Some that I saw before, I now can't see at all. Others I can see, but from the other side. They all have to fit together to make sense. Each view has to make sense. Otherwise, what's the point? And I just was thinking about the whole truth and points of view theme that I noticed. Maybe it was unintentional, but of course that relates quite closely to the writing process itself, doesn't it?
Well, I guess, yeah, because you are, you know, without wanting to sound too precious about this, but one is inventing or writing, you are creating an alternative truth, whether it's a story you've made up or a world that's slightly parallel to the one we live in, or something that's a version of one's own recollection of one's own past. And the unreliable narrator is present in all of us when we tell a story. I mean, Penny often says, if you tell an anecdote, it's different each time you tell it. And I kind of say, well, yes, because you, like the guy at the end of The Wrong Door said, you kind of edit it each time. You remember which bits didn't get quite the reaction, which bits you might want to stress because they got more of a laugh. And in a sense, you're using stories or anecdotes as a means of, I suppose, formally drawing attention to yourself, or being entertaining, or making a point. And sometimes a point can be better made from a story without just saying, I want this to be funny, or I want people to think I'm very clever, by twisting it a little bit. You have to sometimes use the things that you've got, even the experiences you've had yourself, in order to serve another purpose, I suppose. And playing around with the order of things or what happened, I think is acceptable, as long as there's no obvious intention to deceive or get financial advantage or something. But yeah, it is an ambiguous position if you're writing something. It's also based on what you can happen to remember about, if it's a fiction, if it's an event that happened, and I think it's worth reminding, in fiction as well, I was sort of playing around with it and saying that, therefore, putting the narrator in the position of saying, well, actually, I've told the story, but is it made up? In fact, the story was told to me by a friend, but it's completely different. He just had a very mild issue with going to the wrong house. And he told me this when we went for a walk the following day. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. And then all of the rest of it was complete fiction. So yes, it was made up, sort of within the character within it had told me a different story. So yeah, I do play around with that. I think it's a fun and important part of doing it. Yeah.
I just find it really interesting how there isn't one set way of seeing things. I remember once I was a child that I was sitting in class and the teacher did an experiment, and without telling the pupils, she got someone to burst into the classroom and do something really weird and then run out again, and we all had to write down what we'd seen, and it was all totally different.
Yeah, exactly. That's why eyewitnesses, cases that it depends solely on one eyewitness, are often thrown out, I guess. But it's a different argument. But
so we've talked about your short stories, and now the book's also filled with parodies, and you've mimicked brilliantly other writers. You've even done Shakespeare, my goodness, Hemingway, famous detectives, Hunter S. Thompson, and I think perhaps my favourite one is A.A. Milne, and I just loved that story. What is it called? What we learned.
What Pooh and Piglet do in the evenings.
I know, and I don't think I could have read it even in my 20s or 30s, because it would have destroyed my love of them, but I could cope with it now. And I think you do it so brilliantly, because you've just got the voice of A.A. Milne exactly right.
Well, it's the thing about the business about the voice when you're writing. I suppose it's like a style if you're playing a musical instrument or writing a song, or I don't know anything about art, but if you can affect different styles, it's the same kind of thing. And there are some writers whose styles are so distinctive. I mean, Raymond Chandler is one, P.G. Wodehouse, Hunter S. Thompson, Hemingway, Shakespeare, all the ones that I've done. I didn't do the P.G. Wodehouse one in this book because I was a bit worried about what the P.G. Wodehouse estate would say, but I think I've got that cleared up if there's a next one. And A.A. Milne is particularly vivid, memorable style. And I adore the Pooh and Piglet books. I think there's more wisdom to be found in those than in, many a whatever else I won't specify. And I can still remember reading the last chapter of it, which many of you might remember, when they go to Galleon's lap at the top of the 100-acre wood, and he says goodbye to them. I can still remember by the age of about 7 or 8 reading that. And it was tears. I was aware that something very sad had touched me. I remembered it all the time. So it's with enormous affection that I decided, and that Pooh and Piglet, who to a certain extent really exist. You've got to believe when you read a character. I believe that Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler's detective, really exists, that he's out there somewhere. I believe that Holmes and Watson kind of really exist, and a lot of the characters in Dance the Music of Time and so on, and Frodo and various other things. And Pooh and Piglet definitely really exist in some parallel world. So I thought, well, what do they get up to in the evenings? And you just get one idea, you get one little thing And basically I'm afraid alcohol comes into it again with Haken and honey gin, honey vodka. But then I started writing about Pooh and Piglet, and you look at the Pooh and Piglet characters, all of them, and if you have that kind of view, you start scrutinizing them and you think there's a bit of stuff bubbling around under the surface there. I mean, what on earth has made Eeyore the way he is? What's happened to Kanga's husband, for a start? Who the hell was Trespassers William? The Piglet's uncle, so-called uncle, and Mr. Sanders, who Pooh's house. I mean, what happened to Mr. Sanders? So I think, you start digging around, and once you get that angle on it, you've got a whole, I mean, any psychiatrist would have an absolute field day with that lot. And there are people who believe that, books have been written, parodies about Pooh and Piglet, and, people who claim that they all exhibit different personality types. So it was, once you got going, it was really easy, but I hope very affectionate, because I think it is just the best children's book ever written, that one.
I agree with you, and I think your affection does come through. So to use a Milne word, can we have a little smackerel of it, just to give us a take?
Okay, I'll just read the first page in a bit. Penny has also read the full thing, but it's easier just to get the book out and do it myself. It rained and it rained and it rained. Piglet was goodness knows how old. He couldn't remember because Christopher Robin had never told him, but he certainly felt old enough this morning, and he had never seen so much rain. Not a good start to the day. He flicked the curtain shut and groped his way across the room. Standing on tiptoe, he managed to switch on the light. "Christ, turn that bloody thing off," said a growly voice from under a pile of rugs on the bed. "Oh, good morning, Pooh," Piglet said in a nervous little voice. When Pooh was in one of his moods, Piglet became nervous. He was, after all, and in every way, a very small animal. Said Pooh. Piglet went into the kitchen, piled high with dirty plates, bottles and honey pots, and started nosing around in the cupboard, looking for coffee and aspirin. After a while, he heard a thump on the floor, a curse and a cough. Winnie the Pooh had got up. A few moments later, Pooh was himself in the kitchen, crashing around as usual. Piglet stepped back, not wanting to get squished. "My God, what a night," Pooh said. "My head. Look, we better get ourselves straightened out. Where's that coffee? He's going to be here in a minute to take us off on some madcap adventure." Pooh jammed some beans into the grinder, but as usual, his paws didn't manage to screw the top down before he switched it on. Piglet reached up and took it off him just in time. His trotters, though hardly more dexterous, were at least smaller. Ignoring Pooh's theatrical grimaces at the noise, he managed to get the beans ground and the coffee percolating without too many mishaps. He never understood where all the things in his and in Pooh's and in Kanga's and all the rest of their kitchens came from. Most of the items were virtually unusable without an opposable thumb or, in Owl's case, hands. It seemed that the world had been designed for creatures other than them. That was just the way things were. He also wondered why he sometimes thought in capital letters. Another thing he knew he ought to ask Mr. Milne, though he also knew he would never have the courage to do so.
I just love it, and I often in text messages I write in certain phrases in capital letters.
Exactly. and yes, if you don't, it's good to be careful one of those things, because if people, otherwise people think, "Oh, why has she suddenly started shouting at me?" But yes, he does that. That's one of the really clear things that really stuck in my mind, particularly when Piglet was thinking he would put things in capital letters when he was a bit frightened of them. It was actually a brilliant device, and obviously very easy to imitate, very easy to pick up and to ape. So, that was one of the things that gave me confidence that I could pull the parody off. Yeah.
Oh, no, it was brilliant, and actually the ending was really. I really want to know what happens next in it.
Well, so do I.
Yeah, in book 2, I think.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yes, I think he's left hanging there, and there's still part of him still undecided which way to go, as are we all. But...
And you say how it's with great affection that you write like A.A. Milne. Do you have to like the author or the author's work? Do you think to do it well?
I don't like Hemingway very much, and I'm quite pleased with the power. I mean, I quite like his stuff, but it's a bit kind of self-consciously male and macho and brutal. But I like the prose, the kind of very pared down prose he does. I think Raymond Carver does it better, but the disciples are often, better than the teachers sometimes. But all the others, yeah, I mean, all the detective writers and Hunter S. Thompson and things. Yes, I think you have to. I think the most important thing, though, is to find a voice that you can not only emulate, but also that's fun to write. And some people, as I said, like Chandler and Woodhouse, are so distinctive that you can, a sentence is enough to make you realise that you're reading a parody of them. And then once you get in the groove, it's like, you know, getting into a rhythm of playing some music. But
yeah,
thing takes sort of, that aspect takes over. Yeah.
Well, I'm the only person I know that doesn't like The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, so I preferred your story. What does he call alcopops? What does he call them?
Alcopopos. He used to drop these sort of slightly spurious Spanish words into his things, didn't he? So he's alcopopos and lamburnos and chefor de grande and things like that. So it was just, it was just a bit of fun.
So we've talked about how you get their voices, the process of that. Should we talk slightly more broadly about the writing as a process or as a craft?
The one thing that I get sort of slightly annoyed by is that sometimes people think that writing is something that you can just do. We can all write our names, we can write shopping lists, we can write letters. So people say, oh, I want to write a story, and then they start and they maybe don't succeed in finishing it, and they sort of throw their hands up and say, oh, I'm no good. I have no inspiration, I don't know, I can't do it. But which I've sometimes been guilty out with other things, like Penny's told me several times there's no reason that I could not paint. I just say I'm a bad artist. Well, actually, you've never done it, you've never tried. Well, why should I be any good? And writing is just the same. You need to do it with a certain amount of discipline and a certain amount of practice. And it won't just descend on you like divine unction, but there are ways in which you can turn it into a bit of a process. And I think, as a friend of mine, I learned last week, I've known her for 40 years, I didn't know she made shirts, and I was having an email exchange with her about it. And I said, I don't know how you start making a shirt. Can't imagine how you do it. She said, I can't imagine how you start writing a story. So it set me thinking about just some of the things that I do or don't do. And I'll just quickly run through them, because if anyone's interested in the writing process, I'm not for a second suggesting that these are rules that everyone should follow, but I'm just saying that if you make it into a process and apply some of the same kind of rigor that you would use for practicing scales on a guitar or following a recipe or making a shirt or anything else, learning a language, it removes some of the sort of supposed magic from it. It turns it into something that then you think, oh, okay, if I do this and then I do that, that will help accomplish what I want to do. So some of the things I don't do, and as I said, you may find if you're writing stuff that you do the exact opposite, but it's as well to be aware of what the things are that work for you. I always have to know what's going to happen at the end. I can't even start unless I know roughly how it's going to finish. It's like knowing a destination of a journey. You know, you decide you're going to go to Newbury. Once you've decided that, how you get there, what route you take, isn't important. You know, you can take any diversions, as long as you've got set that goal to follow. I never make notes, because I find that the human brain's a really good problem-solving machine, absolutely fantastic. You can think of the number of times you've gone to bed at night and you've been a bit worried about something, and you put it at the back of your mind, literally that phrase, put it to the back of your mind. It's worth bearing in mind. And maybe a day or so later, you come back and it's like a piece of dough that has risen while you've been doing something else. It's now a different shape, it's a different thing. And sometimes the problem has resolved itself, or you can see the solution. You maybe look at it from a different point of view. And it's the same with writing something. You get the basic ingredients, and I just sort of shove it in the back of my head. And if I make notes, I personally find that really stultifying. It kind of anchors my thoughts at a particular point, and you just let it flow, let it do its thing, and then it'll kind of come out when it's ready. Again, other people may just disagree. I never write longhand. I always type, because if you write longhand, you've got to type the thing anyway. Because I wrote a rather good story longhand, and then I lost it. So, you know, that's I'm not doing that again. And I always start when I've got enough time to break the back of it. So, you know, it's quite intimidating having a blank sheet of paper or a blank screen, but much worse is having a screen with just one paragraph on it that you then have to stop because you've run out of steam, or you don't know what's going to happen next, or you've run out of time. So I say, right, I'm going to give myself a couple of hours to do this, and, you know, get a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, whatever, tea, depending on the time of day, and say, right, I'm going to start it. I now know where I'm going to go, and try and get sort of halfway through it. And I never review it as I go along. I always leave that till the end. And if I get stuck, I do a bit of description. I stand back and do a little set piece of describing the building or a character, just sort of get myself in the groove. Now, all those things work for me. For anyone else who writes, you might have 6 completely different things, or no things, or you might do those 6 things, but completely the opposite way around. You may never know what the beginning is going to be. You may always make those. Absolutely fine. All I'm saying is that it's really good to just stop now and again. And it's the same with anything that you do. Be aware of what it is, that's the process that you go through that makes it work for you. And you don't have to follow it all the time, but at least you know that that is a map that experience has shown will get you to your destination. And then, because there's nothing worse than starting something and not finishing it. It's really, you know, sort of dispiriting, and it's a sensation to be avoided. So that's what I do, and they are maybe worth bearing in mind for anyone who wants to write or do anything else, but not with those rules. Not, don't suggest following them. I just suggest be aware of what they might be for you. And that's helps me a lot, just to know that I've got that structure behind me. It means I'm much more likely to finish things to my satisfaction.
What you say about having a destination, I think that's. I write a bit, but I always write poetry because I can never think of a plot. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe if I thought of the destination first and work backwards, I might actually come up with something.
It's worth a try. I mean, you know, if you know where you're going, there's a reasonable chance that you'll get there. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know, you know, you won't get anywhere in particular.
No. On the other hand, I think to keep writing all the time and knowing sometimes it's okay just to have a wander, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a finished product every time.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm quite sort of mechanistic about it. If I write something, I like to write something to finish it, not just to express a particular emotion or a particular form of words. I mean, I write songs, which sort of satisfies that goal a bit more, though I like those to tell stories as well. But if you have a destination in mind, there's then virtually no limit to how much you can wander around. In order to get there, you've always got that kind of Star of Bethlehem in the sky that you are following, and you may go via all kinds of weird routes. You may meet people or characters that you weren't expecting, but you know that, you know, at any point you can get back on the straight and narrow again. Otherwise, the thing can just turn into you know what it's going to turn into. It's nice to have some control. You know, you've got your head on the neck of the snake, and you're holding that down, and the rest of the body whips everywhere, and you go with it. But you know that's where you've got to get to. It works for me, but you know it's may not for everyone.
I mean,
horses.
You were in publishing, weren't you? Do you think that helped when you came to put the book together?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was. There are certain boring things that one has to do. In fact, it would be interesting to turn the tables for a moment and just ask you a few questions, because obviously now it's a lot easier to publish books oneself, or for a small company to publish books. You don't have to have big litho printing presses that we used to have to deal with back in the days of the Columbus company that I mentioned. And you don't have to have long runs. You don't have to have a huge staff of people. You can do stuff very quickly. The page layout programs are freely available. So now a lot of people are quite reasonably and understandably wanting to, if not rush into print, then at least go into print with stuff that they've written, and fiction or otherwise. I mean, you must get, as a bookseller, I guess you get quite a lot of people saying, I have published this book, can you help sell it? I mean, what would be the things that you would, if you don't say to them, they're worth saying now that you really ought to, you know, these are the things that you really ought to make sure you get right before you.
Well, for a start, it's always a lot nicer if they do actually, if there isn't a COVID happening, to come into the bookshop and see me in person, or one of us in person, because, or even call us in a friendly way, because there's nothing like the personal touch, really. And we are quite busy. We don't read books all day long. And if you just send an email, to be honest, it probably won't get read. And particularly, do not send an email, and this always happens, with a link to your book on Amazon, because bookshops
yes, exactly.
hate Amazon, and it's one of the most common mistakes to, like, annoy us, putting it politely, immediately. So don't do that. But
I'm thinking about even before the book's been published. I mean, obviously when it's on Amazon, it's been happening, but what would you, if somebody came and said, I want to do a book,
Yeah.
I want to publish a book.
I'd
What
say
would you tell them would be the things they've got
work
to
your costings out
first?
beforehand. They often come to us. Well, and actually, that's after the book. So before the book, work out your costings, because obviously the bookshop will need to take it at a discount, and you've got printing costs and maybe a bit of advert costs. It's no good coming to us and saying, what shall I sell it for? Really, they need to have worked that out so they actually get some money too. But I know it shouldn't matter, but the front cover is so important.
Well, I mean, it's important. When you go into a bookshop, you're buying the words, but you don't display the pages open. You display the book covers. That's what you see is the covers. You walk in, you don't see a single word apart from the titles.
No. So, I mean, customers and booksellers can make a decision about the book in one to 2 seconds, really. So,
yeah.
I mean, you happen to know a designer, didn't you, or an illustrator? So
yeah, well, I know a friend of mine's a book cover designer who helped me with that aspect, and we know an illustrator. Yeah, because you do see some fairly indifferent covers, put it like that, and
it's really important. And I would say, I mean, you are in charge. If you self-publish, you're more in charge of the promotional side of things than the bookseller is. The bookseller can help up to a point, but you have to take that on. I mean, are you ideally positioned because of Penny Post, but you also work really hard ringing up other bookshops?
Yeah, well, you've got, I mean, the fun part, you write the stuff, that's the easy part. And then the production part is which is what I'm well used to from years of having done that. There is a process, that phrase, a process again, is that you start, there's certain things that have to happen in a certain order. And then that's done, it's got a finite end. It ends with the book in your hand. But that is when the work really starts, because you tell your friends, you tell your relatives, and quite quickly you run out of people that you can immediately phone up. And even then through Penny Post, which helped, you're fighting. I think the UK publishes more books than any other country in the world, not per capita, but in absolute terms. You are fighting with people who've got the entire might of publishing marketing departments behind them, people who manage to get in the news, and the most unfeasibly kind of almost corrupt way that people can sort of get their books mentioned on sort of primetime news programs or whatever. And you're fighting against all of that, and you've just got to. It's soul destroying, because you think, I've written this stuff, it's brilliant, it's well produced, I've put a year of my life into it. Why doesn't everyone want to buy it? It's quite easy to get quite personal about it.
Yeah.
If selling 100 copies a day, I mean, people will say, "What's wrong? Why aren't you, Emma? Can you just sell some more, please?" So you go out and tell people to come in, please.
They have to manage their expectations. But I mean, actually, you could have especially a hardback fiction book by a well-known author in your bookshop, by a massive publisher, and we might not sell any of it. So
everyone's saying, they say, that's an interesting book. When's it coming out in paperback? I annoyed Tessa by saying that once a few months ago, and I think she nearly shamed me into buying the book, but I think I kept my hand in my pocket for long enough and said, hang on, in charge here.
Not easy to irritate.
Yeah, I was but it was touch and go. Yeah.
And also, speak to local presses like your local newspaper and tell your bookshop that that's what you're doing. So we can see that you're working hard. But I mean, your book's doing brilliantly. You've done all the right things, and it's a brilliant book. So I hope you write another one. And
well, this is the plan. If this goes well, there are plenty more where that came from. But yes, it was great fun. I mean, it wasn't a sit-down start like doing a novel, which I've done 2 or 3 of those, only one of which got published ages ago. But this was a bit here and a bit there and a bit here. So it was actually the writing process was a delight, a pleasure, the huge sort of, one of the things, as well as writing songs, that I enjoy doing more than almost anything else.
Well,
and then it gets progressively less interesting as you go on, culminating in phoning up strange bookshops on the other side of the country. But you've got to do that. It's all part of the job.
You were very lucky to have a quote from Stephen Fry, which must have helped sell it in.
Oh yes, that did help. Yes.
We can't all authors can't have access to Stephen Fry, but
no, he does. I do happen to know, because I know somebody else who asked him for a quote that he declined. So I'd like to think that I know he read the book because he made some comments to me about it. But I was also asked somebody else famous, not as famous as Stephen, in through someone else, and I won't say who it was, but he was an author, and he wrote back this rather sort of pompous email to our mutual friend, and I thought it was pompous. He said, "I don't do this kind of thing. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that, you know, people, there shouldn't be blurb on covers. There shouldn't be this kind of thing." I thought, "Oh, right." And then in your shop, a few days later, I saw one of his books absolutely festooned with quotes. And then I saw his quote, his name, on another book, and I thought, hypocrite. And then he said at the end, he revealed the real reason. He said, "Well, if you've got Stephen Fry's name on it, what do you want me on there as well for?" And I thought, actually, yeah, you're right.
You know what, Brian? There's a whole story in what you've just said, I think.
Yeah. Except I couldn't name names. I think I'd have to be quite careful about that. But
well, anyway, it's a brilliant, and especially I found I've gone through phases during lockdown of not being able to read a really big book, and it's just absolutely brilliant if you want something, you know, not snappy but short chunks that take you elsewhere or make you laugh. So
yeah, I think the longest one's about 10,000 words. Meeting Stanley, I think, is the last one, is the longest one, and some of them are about 2,000. So it's pretty much everything between the two. Yeah.
Anyway, people, buy the book. It's less than £10, and if you go on the Hungerford Bookshop's website, you can get it very easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, we can't hear you. Sue?
Yep, I'm there now.
Right.
Sorry, I'm my mouse goes off and has a little, you know, life of its own, really. And when I want to wake it up, I have to smack it quite hard to to come back. Anyway, thank you both very much. That was lovely and very entertaining and illuminating. This insight into your process, and I was rather reminded of one of your stories when you were talking about it, the process, and I too have struggled with J.C. Holt in my time.
Of course, you're a medieval historian as well. Yeah.
Well, no, in my case, it was just one of those courses that one does. I wasn't actually a medievalist, but occasionally one had to dabble in those waters. So
I loved those waters. It was quite intimidating because, you know, everyone said, "This is the man who wrote the book," and as I said, that was the article that was absolutely the thing, and he was my supervisor. So completely intimidating.
Yes.
And, he wasn't really interested in me at all. Fortunately, I met that guy George, one of my fellow historians, who told me to read the article, and I read it and got it, and then made that unpardonable boo-boo at the end of. That's excruciating. Another disaster. We come back, we end where we finished, where we started.
Yes, I have to say that particular story gave me shudders because of the.
It can happen to anyone. Yes,
the little bells it rang, but I think my favourite one is the case of the missing teaspoons.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
That's true. They just started disappearing from our kitchen room.
I just wanted to know where the hell were the teaspoons.
Well, exactly, and we never found out. I employed Poirot, Miss Marple, Raymond Chandler, and Philip Marlowe and Sherlock Holmes. In my book, you don't have 4 higher authorities than that. I described what happened. None of them came back to me. So, you know, I'm on my own here. We're all on our own. When teaspoons go missing, you know, it's a sort of metaphor of life under capitalism. We're on our own. We can't expect any help. But they do. It happens. Yeah.
Now, in terms of managing some questions, I'm sure people have questions, although Emma has done a brilliant job of probing some of the aspects of what you do and the book itself. But if people would like to ask questions, I'm not sure.
Hello, can I say something?
Yes, do, Alistair.
Yes, if people wish to ask a question, the best thing to do is, I think there's a button in the bottom that says raise your hand. Oh no, I think that's in Skype. Well, just unmute yourself and speak up.
All shout at once.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Go ahead, Becca.
Hi. I'm really pleased to hear that there's going to be a sequel or another one.
Depends how well this one sells, Becca.
Yeah, but I also know that you've written many, many, many stories.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to know what characteristics were in the stories that you chose that meant that you selected those in this large.
Well,
what was it that meant that they were eligible for volume 1?
Well, I mean, it's all quite subjective in a way, and I mean, Penny and I had a slightly different take on some of them, but I wanted to have the 3 different types. I wanted to have some which were personal disaster tales, some which were parodies, and some which were fiction, because you get books which are just short stories and not normally with that mixture, so I thought that would be a bit different. And I wanted to have a mixture of long and short, and some that were lighter and some that were darker. Also, there are a couple of themes that I do tend to plough, furrows I tend to plough, the kind of law, the tale of the unexpected consequences, a variation of the theme of no good deed goes unpunished. And there were probably, I didn't want to have too many of, there were a couple of other ones, and I didn't want to put them in with this because I didn't want it would seem a bit kind of samey. And also with the parodies, there was definitely my favourite parody is one of that I've done is one of Jeeves and Worcester, but I was at the time a bit worried about the copyright situation but apparently I've since established that actually parody is kind of fair comment and you can go with it. But I didn't know that at the time, and then we'd already planned the book, and I decided to leave it as it was. But I could have there could have been another selection, and so there's a couple of stories that are much, much longer that I thought I would maybe wait and see what the reaction was to this one, sort of 20,000 words that maybe need, and a few also that needed illustrations in order to make them work, which
oh wow,
a bit more complicated. Like the parodies I've done of the local council, which require sort of, sort of fake train maps and things that I've drawn, so road signs. So.
Well, I look forward to it, and I know they'll be very, equally varied.
I hope
broad
so.
Range, yeah, fabulous. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I ask another one? Sorry, I know you're all sick of hearing from me, but there's a story that's about 13 crime writers in a country hotel. Yes. And I did arrange an event that involved 13 crime writers all staying in a hotel in Hungerford. No. But one of the characters is struggling writing a crime novel, and it's obviously that you love detective fiction. Yeah. Do you think you would ever write a detective fiction book yourself?
I've written a short story about a detection, a story where the alibi is so cunning that I can't work out quite how it's ever going to get brought home to the murderer. But I don't know. I think that you've got the trouble about detective fiction is that I do love it because there's an escape. It's wonderful. It's sort of bedtime reading, and you think, nothing more comforting than curling up in bed with your wife and a nice grisly murder, sort of Ruth Rendell or something. But the trouble is actually a lot of what's written in a detective story, 90% of it is actually kind of red herring and MacGuffin and padding, because actually what there is a story that you can often tell quite briefly. And there's a lot, and Ruth Rendell, for example, is very good at going into the psychological background of the characters, and Patricia Highsmith in a different way, and Marlowe, Chandler takes a rather different approach. But it's, I don't know, it's not the sort of thing, I think you need to, the most satisfying ones are novel length. I mean, I've attempted stuff like that, but I think short stories in crime writing, you end up having to, you have rather sort of implausible endings. You suddenly have things that are a bit contrived. I think it's really dangerous. You've got to have something, there are very good few stories where the denouement flows with you want one of those, oh my God moments. One of those things where suddenly, I love it, the scene when the detective has everyone gathered together in the library and then proceeds to point at the most unlikely person and then explains quite logically why it was. And the reader's been given clues. I think this is actually quite a difficult kind of trap to set for a writer. You've got to set your stage very carefully. You've got to have diversions and misguides just at the right moment if it's going to work. It's a real art, I think, underestimated. I'd love to try doing one, definitely. But it's
that more than anything. You're talking about you used to talk about starting out with a destination or an ending.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, that more than anything, you must have to.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you can't start writing it not knowing who the
No, exactly. And you do. There are some stories that you write that you do read that you do get the impression that is exactly what the author has done, is they just sort of meandered along. And as I said, maybe it works for some people, but it's a particularly demanding genre, I think. Effortless, it seems to read, and belittled and derided, but I think harder to pull off than a lot of people might suspect.
Yeah.
I might try it, but I would not hold my breath on that. Any more?
I don't have a question, but I just think it's such a perfect book for lockdown. As Emma said, it's something that you can dip into, you can have a really good laugh, and your writing, you know, is inspirational. Really, it's a really great book. Fantastic to give as a present, I would say, and I'm certainly
you can receive as one, Penny, in your case.
I was given one as a present, and I certainly will be returning the favour. And I just absolutely loved the one about the swimming pool. You encapsulated so many things that I also have thought. I found myself doing at the time when I did go swimming, and it made me long to go swimming again.
Yeah, me too. On rereading it, I miss it a great deal. But I think there's something about repetitive physical activity and there's nothing more repetitive or more boring than swimming, because you go up and then you go down and you go up and then you go down. I could go on. And so strange thoughts get locked in your brain and you can't shake them. And the thing is that once you go back into the pool again, all the circumstances are almost exactly the same. So you get back, you're in the same trunks, you're in the same pool, the same water. And 2 days later, and the same thought sort of kicks in again. So you get into a loop, you can associate doing a tumble turn at the deep end with thinking about a particular thing. It does weird things to your head. And I tried to describe what some of those were. Some good, some bad, but they are what they are. But yes, I'm looking forward to getting back to the pool as well, hopefully before too long.
And incidentally, in Lambourn, you can get 8 oranges for £1.60.
Well, any greengrocer from now on, after that debacle, can charge me what they like for oranges, and I'm not going to complain. I mean, that was a real. I mean, the only time I've had a limb broken is, as I said, I've had a nose broken, and it was when I was beaten up by a greengrocer. I think that is I'm quite happy to have no further broken limbs, if only that I can keep that sort of record. I think that's quite a unique achievement. But yes, he was a complete nutcase. I was unexpected. I was not prepared for it. But one never is prepared for somebody who's about to break your nose. Like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they're hit in the face. So.
Yeah, no, I meant £3, not £1.60. That was
whatever. He charged me a £10.
And that's from the butcher as well.
Have the rest. I'm not frightened of butchers. No, it's just greengrocers. But live and learn. Yeah.
Could I ask? Sorry to come to hog the mic. I was very interested in what made you decide, perhaps you and Penny decide, that it would be penny post that you published through. This isn't, I'd like to understand a bit more about the thinking behind that and how you came to that conclusion. Well, that's how you're going to publish.
I mean, it was the articles. Most of them had appeared in Penny Post. Penny Post is a publisher, albeit a digital one, up until now, entirely digital. And I think there's a lot to be said ranging from sort of professionalism right the way through to general commercial prudence, that if you're going to do a venture that involves something that people might buy or which could, result in debts or whatever, you want to have that wall between your own personal finances and the thing that you're doing. I wasn't suggesting that there was going to be a court case, but if, for example, somebody had decided to sue about it, it would be much better that it was published by Penny Post, not me. But I that wasn't the main motivation. I think that as we had a publishing company and as it had something of a local name, hopefully, and reputation, it seemed like the logical thing to do. And I think it was yeah, I think it would have been odder to have published it privately, having got Penny Post. I think if we'd just been private individuals, I think a lot of time people set up companies to publish things, or there are companies that, you know, act as sort of self-publishing umbrellas, but you have to do all the work for them. But no, Penny Post is a publisher, and it's now a publisher of printed stuff as well. Hopefully not the last one. So.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I can. Yes. I see that. It's funny how, in one's head, one kind of keeps the digital and the print separate.
Yeah.
Just me. But
no, I know what you mean. It was a bridge to cross, because people have sometimes asked us with Penny Post, oh, it would be lovely if you printed it out, and it would be lovely. And I'd say, well, that would be lovely if, you know, we printed it out, if somebody else could pay the print bills and then organise the distribution, because that's what kills a lot of publishing ventures, is not only the print cost, but also the, you know, the stamp that you've got to put on the envelope. So it was something we shied away from. I mean, my background, as I said, was in print publishing, and you know, it was a constant battle to, you know, grappling with all the costs attached with that, of which the printers' bills were you know, one of the largest. And it's nice not to have those. So so yes, it was a conscious decision to kind of cross a line back to something that I'd done before.
yeah.
But I think it made sense to do it that way. But we will certainly, well, if there is another one, I'm sure that will be, we have 10 ISBN numbers that we ordered, so we've got room for 9 more without incurring any more costs on that aspect of it. So
Yes, one forgets about all these little you know, tricks and that one needs to, or the hurdles one needs to go across. Does one still have to give the British Library a copy of everything you print?
yes, and Cambridge and Oxford and there's 6 you've got copyright libraries, and they will chase you up in due course. They will insist upon it, and they've got legal right to demand it, and it's quite right they should have. I mean, it's you know, it's everything goes there. You can get, I mean, God knows, they don't know whether they just sort of tip them into a great pit in the ground, most of the books that are published, including this one. But yes, you've got to do that. You've got to get an ISBN number. You've got to, there's various tedious things you have to do. And if you, for example, I was speaking to somebody publishing a book, and I said, oh, you haven't got an ISBN number on it. It was a couple of years ago. And they said, oh, do you think I ought to have one? And I said, well, yes. I said, it's a bit like having a car, not having a number plate on it, and then it being expected to drive it around on the road. And they said, oh, it's a bit late now. I said, okay, well, you know, but I don't think any bookshop's going to want to stock it. They won't be able to find it. You know? No. Things like that, just little details. And that's part of the boring stuff that comes in between the fun of the writing and the kind of never-ending business of the marketing. There's this brief period in the middle when you just got to concentrate on very mundane things that you have to get right, you know, like proofreading and editing, and then, as Emma said, getting the cover right and stuff like that, and and getting an ISBN number. Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Do you have a team of elves who do your proofreading for you?
Well, I've read the stories about 86 times. Penny's read them about 5 times, and as Penny said, there were still a few things that slipped through. Now, if in an ideal world, I mean, the stuff that we write for Penny Post, we write a lot. I mean, I write about 8,000-9,000 words every Thursday, and I don't have time to proofread it. I proofread it after the thing's been published, and I'm quickly proofreading the column I've written while I can see in the other screen the number of people who are opening it is sort of going up, and you feel like you're being chased, and you come across these awful things where you've just written something and then the phone's rang and then you've carried on but actually written another sentence and 2 words have got compressed. It's like looking at a car crash, and you think, oh, quick, I've got to change it, and then you forget what it was you were trying to say all those hours ago. And that's what you need proofreaders for. And also you need a bit more time. That's the trouble about digital publishing. It's all, people think it's all immediate, so you miss out that stage in the middle, with disastrous consequences. But, you know, sometimes it's good to be quick, rather than, you know, accuracy you can catch up on. But there are some absolutely excruciating mistakes we make every week. But proofreading is, like you said at the very beginning, is something that seems to have vanished from a lot of publishers. You know, you see so many documents published now by all kinds of bodies, which have just got the most shocking mistakes in. And ours, Penny Post, is no exception. But, you know, people think, oh, it's online, I can go back and fix it, I'll sort that out later on, I can, you know, change it tomorrow or whatever. I think there's much more of a kind of just-in-time view about it. The precision, the absolute, you know, accuracy of the semicolon here and the structure and everything absolutely is sort of slightly gone. But, you know, everything has its place, I guess. But I would love to proofread the things better, everything we do, but it's just time is the enemy.
Yes.
Some elves, some proofreading elves would be lovely if anyone knows of any. If they please, yeah. Undervalued profession.
Right. How about anybody else like to ask a question of Brian or Emma?
Back in the 80s, I managed to publish 2 books, but they were technical books on energy efficiency in buildings, non-domestic buildings.
Well, I'd get that reprinted if I were you. That's very much needed now.
And I found it a fascinating task and really enjoyed it. But financially, it wasn't particularly profitable.
No.
And what's your view on writing as a means of earning a living?
Well, I've abandoned, if ever I had any hopes, which at one point I probably nurtured like everybody else. You know, if I wasn't going to score the winning goal in an FA Cup final at Wembley, I was going to write a top 10 song and I was going to write a best-selling novel. I think that, you know, a lot of these things are and have to be their own reward. I mean, obviously with the book, it is possible to look at a balance sheet, say this is how much we spent on it, this is how much we've got in, and there's a profit there. But you know, that's to ignore the amount of time spent writing it. I think anyone who can make any kind of living from writing is probably both very talented. Well, all three are very talented, very single-minded, and very lucky. There's so much stuff now that's available for free. I mean, the articles, the book that you said that you wrote 30, 40 years ago, probably a lot of that information somebody could probably gather. If I wanted to go onto the internet now and write an article tomorrow morning about the subject that you were writing about, I could probably get a vast amount of information for free and look at it and cite it and paraphrase it. And I wouldn't need to spend any money on anything. The idea of paying all the time to read something or to listen to something has kind of disappeared. So to get anybody to pay for fiction or to pay to listen to music is very hard, because you can get almost everything you want for free. You can go and look at, I wanted to look at the text of a James Joyce short story, which I didn't happen to have. I found it online, the whole text, in about 20 seconds. I didn't have to go to the library. I didn't have to go to the bookshop. I didn't even have to get off my backside and go and look in my bookshelf to see if I had it. So yeah, I mean, I do it because I love writing stories and I love writing songs, and fortunately through Penny Post has helped me get some kind of market for them and some kind of traction. But I don't think anyone will. There are a few people who get very rich on it, and some just about make a living. But I think it's exhausting. I think you'd end up spending too much time, you know, worrying, you know, on the kind of marketing side of it. I'm glad that I can, you know, put some time into the marketing, but I don't have to rely upon that for my income. I think it might kill the enjoyment.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, if there are no more questions or anything anybody would like to say,
I'd just like to add one thing, which I think Emma mentioned, but I'll say it for her, is that the copies of the book are available from the Hungerford Bookshop, and indeed, if you happen to be out of the area, from any bookshop. Most bookshops are open, but not open at the moment. They're open for click and collect, and if you email them, or most of them will have a website, you can buy it from there, and it will normally be dispatched during the next couple of days. And the distribution system, the wholesaler system, is still working, so if they don't have it, they can order it in. So yes, please do buy it. Please buy it from the Hungerford Bookshop. You can, whether you're in Hungerford or not, you can get it on their website, and order as many copies as you like for friends, relatives, enemies, whatever, as door stops, draft excluders. It has many uses, and I hope that we'll be able to say that we'll be doing another one. It does slightly depend on, you know, how well this one does, but the first one is the most difficult. We've solved a number of problems that you know, on the technical side that can a second one will be easier to replicate to a certain extent than the first. So that's a possibility. But I've got to make sure we sell enough of these ones first. But anyway, it's been lovely talking about it, and thank you to Emma for putting up with asking questions. And yeah, go to the Hungerford Bookshop to get it. Unaccustomed As I Am, £9.95, and they have copies there now.
Right. Well, thank you very much, and say thank you both for very entertaining and illuminating evening.
And, thank you for having me on.
And it's been great to sort of restart our winter talks again with somebody local and something a slightly different format. I'm hoping that we will have another talk organised in the next month, and indeed the month after, but we will publicise that as soon as we have details. But we have got our mailing list, so we will get back to you and let you know.
And let us know, and we will, of course, as ever, mention it in Penny Post in good time. Just send us the information. And
I was a split second too slow, wasn't I?
I was a split second too eager, I think is probably the phrase. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you all very much, and it was lovely to see everybody as well. And
thanks again for having me, and thank you very
much
for asking the questions.